So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And minutes, please, from Village Hall, June 5th, and regular council meeting, June 12th.
Move the minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And delegations, MOSAIC Forest Management, Molly and Colin, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you. Thanks for having us here tonight. As you see, I am Molly Hudson. I'm the Director of Sustainability at MOSAIC Forest Management. I'm joined today by my colleague, Colin Cosman, who's a land use forester on my team. And we're going to run you through a few MOSAIC updates, but I'd also like to echo our gratitude to the Comox First Nation for hosting us on their territory today. So for our updates today, we'll just do a brief introduction of a few MOSAIC facts. There are a few new faces at the table since we last presented here. We'll talk about our relationship with the Village of Cumberland as the water purveyor, our communications with them and with the community, an update on our operations, and then a little bit of a collective celebration on our great partnership for tourism in this region. Starting out with a few introductory words about MOSAIC, we've been on the BC coast operating sustainable forest management activities for over 100 years with a number of predecessors who you probably recognize from the history of this coast. We manage both public and private forest lands, so we have a tree farm license north of Campbell River, a few forest licenses, and then we manage private lands from Campbell River, essentially all the way down the east side of the island to Souk. We have two owners. We're privately owned by the BC and the federal public pension funds. So those two owners brought MOSAIC to be in 2019 by bringing together our two predecessor companies, Timber West and Island Timberlands. And so those two pension funds own us wholly and really view their investment in us as a synergy between their long-term returns to their pensioners and our long-term vision of consistent, stable forest management and really providing that reliable timber supply for both domestic and international customers. We are Canadian owned, as I said, and our timber, I always like to remind folks that sending our logs to local producers is always our preference, and it's also done through government policy, which requires that our exports are advertised and offered to local buyers before they are shipped internationally. Our stewardship approach is really driven by many of the certifications you see here on the screen. Beyond the government regulations, the Private Managed Forest Land Act and other regulatory structures, these certifications really drive our day-to-day practices. And in particular, I'll highlight the Sustainable Forestry Initiative as our forest management standard. It ensures that we're meeting their requirements around water management, around wildlife habitat management, around Indigenous relations, and many others. Our audit reports are publicly available online, so it also adds that extra level of transparency for our customers and communities. I'll also highlight here our Progressive Aboriginal Relations certificate that the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business grants us. We are silver level certified, and this provides us a framework beyond just the kind of ad hoc relationship that we could maybe have had with First Nations, but really structures our commitment to First Nations, and really we see it as a clear path on how we move forward together on reconciliation, everything from economic development to community support and lots in between. We've just recently released our 2022 sustainability report, so you can find it online. I encourage you to check it out at our website. A few of the things that we highlight in it are our Big Coast Forest Climate Initiative. So this is the initiative in which we took 40,000 hectares of our private forest lands and dedicated them to a carbon crediting program. So these are primarily old forests that are set aside for 25 years to provide carbon credits to the voluntary carbon market. And it also allowed us to build a partnership with the Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas program to have them help us in providing advice on what those lands will do after the 25-year period. So they will work on those lands for the length of the project and provide us a report on what's next for those 40,000 hectares. Also in 2022, if you have a chance to flip through it, you'll see that we really expanded our investment in Indigenous training, scholarships, and community initiatives. We're really happy that recently we were awarded the SFI Leadership and Conservation Award for our leading work in climate smart forestry. So this is partly the Big Coast project that I just spoke about. It's also the carbon footprint tracking that we've done and our commitment to being a net zero organization by 2035. And a lot of the work we're doing on modeling local climate conditions to better predict operational shutdowns, as we were talking about before, and other potential impacts to our forests from climate change. Now to bring things a little bit more local, I'm really proud and happy to be able to talk about the Perseverance Watershed Initiative. This group is a partnership between the Cumberland Community Forest Society, the Village of Cumberland, and MOSAIC. We first talked about it here in this room maybe in late 2021, and I'm really proud to say that we've built a great partnership and made some progress as well. Just to remind you, there are 4 pillars to this work: watershed science, watershed land use planning, watershed awareness, and watershed security process alignment. So a really great partnership that was kicked off in 2021 and continues today. Some of the good progress that we've made has been on shared communications and outreach. So you can find information on this initiative on our website as well as the 2 other organizations' websites. We're working together on research within the Village of Cumberland's watershed, so doing stream discharge monitoring and assessing where we can gather more information relevant to the village. We're working on a data sharing agreement so that some of the more detailed land-based data that MOSAIC has, specifically through our LiDAR, we'll be able to share that with the village so that they can make better decisions around water and watersheds. And obviously, you know, having a more strategic look at operational planning rather than a case-by-case approach, really looking years into the future and being able to discuss areas of particular concern to the village, and MOSAIC being able to feel a little bit more operational certainty because we're having these conversations further in advance. So really happy with the progress so far. Lots more work to do on this front, but it's been a great start to date. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Colin.
Great, thanks, Molly. Good evening, everyone. So just want to take a minute and talk about water purveyors and the work that we do with water purveyors and communications. So we do have a community drinking watershed fact sheet. We share this with folks in the community that are interested in everything we do to protect and maintain water quality. It's also available on our website, so lots of really good information there. We also work with the Village of Cumberland water purveyors, and we've had a strong working relationship with them for many years. We've met with them annually to have opportunities to discuss mutual interests in the watershed. And these meetings are a really great opportunity just to share information from MOSAIC about our operating plans, but also to hear from the Village of Cumberland water purveyors. So those meetings happen annually, and we also have conversations, obviously, throughout the year. Part of our communications is also sharing specific fact sheets related to forestry operations. So you can see the document on the far right there is a Cumberland Forestry Activities fact sheet. This one is for VO 74. So VO74 is an area where we have upcoming activities. If you look at the map on the lower right, you can see the village of Cumberland. I guess in the upper right of that map, the gold star is the location of VO74. We've reviewed this area with the Village of Cumberland water purveyors over the last 2 years, discussed it, made adjustments, had a field review with folks. We've also shared this information with UROC as well. Right now we have road reconstruction scheduled for later in August or September, weather dependent, and then harvest would follow that. So it's really two separate areas. The larger map that you can see on the upper left, is the harvest areas, the orange areas. So two separate areas, includes buffers on the main streams, individual leaf tree retention, and some different things happening there just to provide some different values and manage different pieces there. You can see one of the mountain bike trails on the center area is buffered. It's on MOSAIC lands and also crosses Village of Cumberland land. But for these areas, our harvest plans and road reconstruction plans are created from forest professionals and engineers. Environmental Monitor will be involved with these activities, overseeing both road reconstruction and harvesting. And then our contract managers who oversee the activities are also professionals. So lots of work goes into managing all the values appropriately here. One thing I did want to highlight is you can see in the center the Trent Main is shown there. MOSAIC will be investing money, probably doing some minor grading, certainly replacing some of the drainage structures in that area. So not only is that for our activities, but it does benefit Village of Cumberland water purveyors for access and others that want access in this area. So it's a big part of our roads and infrastructure that it doesn't just benefit MOSAIC wanting access here, it benefits everyone. So just want to talk about access agreements and tourism for a minute. The photo on the upper left is of MOSAIC folks with Village of Cumberland folks, Manulife, and UROC. So last year MOSAIC led a process to have a new MOU created and signed by all the parties. So this was a way for everybody to get together one evening and celebrate all the hard work that went into that MOU and the success that it brings for all parties. We also provide an access agreement to UROC, which is really important, and a lot of MOSAIC folks and our contractors live, work, and play here in the community, contribute to the community and mountain bike in the community. So, it's just take advantage of that as well. Access agreements to our private managed forest lands really do support tourism around the Village of Cumberland and the Comox Valley, generating a lot of revenue and the local economy. Just want to share BC Bike Race is a great example of that. We signed access agreements with them and an MOU for this year's event. I think they have over 600 racers this year, spending 3 nights in the Village of Cumberland. MOSAIC is also making some donations through that process and working with the BC Bike Race folks. So we're really excited to support these kinds of activities when it benefits everybody. On top of that, we do have more than a dozen access agreements we provide to different folks on private managed forest lands. Another example is the Forbidden Gravel Experience. They just had an event a week or so ago, and through that process we did provide donations to the Cumberland Food Share. So it's nice to be able to support those events and also the good work that nonprofit groups do in the community. So, it's exciting to see MOSAIC Private Managed Forest Land supporting sustainable forestry along with events like the BC Bike Race and tourism in the valley. So with that, thank you for your time. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks so much. Questions, Council?
I don't have questions, just some comments. I really like hearing about the carbon credit purchase options, so thanks for that. That's a really cool thing to hear about. Thanks for your guys' work on the PWI, obviously. Yeah, and just from hearing from staff, if we could just advocate for more data sharing.
Sure.
And I'm really happy to hear what's happened already, and we've known each other, or known council for quite a while, but the more sharing obviously is advantageous for both parties. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but thanks for the update.
Great, thanks, Sean.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the presentation. Good to hear that, you know, some of Tim's feedback is being accepted and acted on, and that's great. Just out of curiosity, how many hectares do you guys have under management on the island?
Over our whole land base?
Yeah,
Do I have to do this so people
Yeah.
can hear me? Is that working?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Over the whole land base, it's over 550,000 hectares.
550.
Of private land, yeah, and then another, 100,000 or more in crown licenses.
okay. Yeah, so 40,000, that's fairly significant. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you working with 10 minutes to alter some of those cut blocks. It's a really positive step, and I appreciate the data sharing. Maybe this isn't something you can answer immediately because it's probably subject to market value or markets and things like that. But your annual allowable cut, or not allowable cut, but your annual projected cut as far as volume goes in the watershed, do you project it to remain stable or go up or down, or how does it look to you folks?
Sure, yeah, I don't have number kind of details today, but the way our cut is allocated across the entire company is managed on a kind of regional basis, and then a watershed basis, and then a sub-watershed basis.
Yeah.
So we do, with kind of the second growth forestry sustainable harvest level, you kind of you project your harvest to remain steady over time over the big land base. How that scales down to this particular watershed, I don't have handy on me, but you can imagine that the kind of cadence of harvest that we have is subject to what the inventory is of that particular area.
I figured it wouldn't be a simple
Yeah.
question. Is there any chance that you can have larger buffers in some of the more tertiary streams or seasonal streams? It's, those are the ones that really add to the temperature water flows downstream. That's something I've seen in past practices here. Is that something that's considered, or how do you come up with
so
those?
each block is designed with, those kinds of considerations, and our riparian management framework does provide recommended buffers for small streams in some cases, depending on their connectivity to drinking water and fish, and there's a whole kind of matrix classification. And then the planner has some professional discretion above and beyond that. So it often depends on the harvest system that we might be using for that area and the access to it. So it really is a case-by-case kind of scenario outside of that formalized matrix, but certainly can take your feedback back. We're on coastal BC, so managing every stream
Yeah.
is kind of hard because there are many, but they are a careful part of the considerations in our planning process.
Okay. And finally, I'd just like to thank you for your willingness to cooperate and the access you provided for folks as well. It goes a long way in this community. So.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I know you've been doing a lot of good work, especially around Perseverance, and that's really positive. I think it's sort of just the beginning of, what we could be in the future. I think private managed forests are very important to the island in particular, and so to local governments on the island. The private managed forest makes up 80% of the forests on the island, and about 20% crown, where it's reversed in the rest of the province. And so there really is a special relationship between islanders and private managed forest lands. And I think that that's why we've really tried to push for better regulation. Crown land has a higher standard of regulation than private managed forest land currently, and I think that's why we keep trying to move that dial forward, because for Islander it is really important. And I wanted to maybe get a little bit more information about some of the practices the Big Coast Forest Initiative, for example, is there any consideration for our island communities of including more of island watersheds in the Big Coast project instead of continuing to actively log, as we've seen the next cut block so close to our reservoirs? You know, is there a consideration that, you know, we could put that 25-year sort of stop on those, the watersheds, basically, that serve local governments?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So most of the folks who live on the east coast of Vancouver Island get their water from a watershed that we're involved in. So, you know, it's Cumberland, as you say, is not in a unique position that way, right? We have many water purveyance relationships up and down the island. And, you know, because of that, it's actually not an insignificant portion of our land base, right? If you think about the Comox Lake watershed, which also is a drinking watershed, that's a very sizable watershed, especially compared to, you know, the area that Cumberland is managing for drinking water. So that would be a very significant portion of our land base. You know, that said, you know, Big Coast has been successful so far. We're happy with how it's going. We think that if it continues to be successful, we'll have the opportunity to expand. I don't anticipate it'll be at a whole watershed level, but we will always be looking to opportunities to stack values, carbon, wildlife, drinking water, communities, with those areas that we identify for carbon projects. So we did that to some degree with Big Coast. We really prioritized old forests in Big Coast. And the Cumberland Community Watershed is a primarily second growth forest, so it has some Big Coast areas in it, but not a huge amount. So in the future, if we do expand our carbon crediting initiatives, we would certainly be looking to key drinking watersheds and other areas to have some areas in those watersheds be a part of the carbon initiative. You know, there are the carbon world is a balance. Sometimes, you know, the value of carbon outweighs the value of harvesting it, and sometimes it's the other way around. So there's a, you know, complicated decision-making process that we go through to designate these areas as potentially carbon areas or not. But, you know, drinking water, watersheds are certainly a factor.
Yeah, and so regard to water and how you guys, I think, are regulated to not have a negative impact on water quality.
Yes.
There's, you know, some issues around how tightly regulated that is or not, but you don't really have any obligation around water quantity, and I think that's something that local governments have to grapple with. And certainly, you know, as we can see, long drought periods are expected, more flash flood type issues. So the forests are key in helping regulate both of those things, right? So having proper soils and detention of rainwater on the trees and infiltration and all that is really, really important to, you know, feeding our aquifers and stopping those waters from just rushing out to the ocean. What sort of operational aspects do you guys employ to deal with the water quantity stuff that we're concerned about?
Sure. Yeah. There's a really long history of watershed science in coastal ecosystems being focused on how forestry might impact peak flows in the winter. Going back decades, we have really good science to tell us what that relationship looks like. We don't have such great science yet on the relationship between low flows, droughty conditions, and forest structure, and that part of forest hydrology is less well studied on the BC coast. So we're looking to the Pacific Northwest, Washington and Oregon. We're partnering with research organizations and other forest companies to study coastal watersheds, and particularly ask some questions in some cases around low flows and just generally about the outputs of these managed forests and the various structures of those forests and how they might impact the outputs from a water perspective, and also all of the things that live in the water and all of the characteristics that you're talking about in terms of temperature, et cetera. So, you know, what we're doing on the low flow front is asking more questions, doing more research, trying to really bring a localized perspective to, you know, what levers we can pull to have either no or a mitigatable impact on the droughty conditions that we do expect to see continue.
Okay, so you're not quite there yet on trying to mitigate the effects of climate change that we know are coming. Have you thought about, so we're dealing with, you know, biodiversity loss, we're dealing with forest fires. There's so many things that are coming down the pipe with climate change. Like, what sort of things are you doing? Like drought-resistant trees? Are you trying to increase the biodiversity of the trees that you're planting? Do you do a species assessment when you are looking at doing a lot? If there's, you know, species at risk within the lot, are there accommodations that you make there? Just wondering.
Yes, all of the above. I feel like I'm dominating this a little bit. Yes, all of the above. So we have a seed orchard in Saanich where we produce the seed for almost all of the seedlings we plant. And there's a detailed kind of tree breeding and management process that goes into breeding future seedlings to resist drought conditions, to resist deer browse. And, you know, there's a lot of work provincially going on under the provincial chief forester's office as to, you know, as ecosystems change, how can we move seed around the province to adapt to those future climate conditions. So yes, on seedlings, you know, all of our seedlings are selected for a harvest area prior to harvest even beginning. So there's foresters assessing the existing stand, assessing the harvest area, and writing a prescription for that stand of ecologically suitable species. And, you know, we are interested in, you know, obviously a climate resilient future. So introducing that drought resistance, introducing species like western white pine that has a great track record now of being adaptable to those tough weather conditions. So yes, there's lots we're doing on that front. And, you know, the thing that gets me really excited about the forest management that we're doing is that, you know, if you read any of the IPCC reports about what a climate-friendly future looks like, it points to sustainable forest management. It doesn't say stop logging trees, forest needs to stay exactly as they are. It actually recommends that the cycle of sustainable forest management is a part of a climate-friendly solution and a climate-friendly future, because wood products are much more climate-friendly than carbon and
Cement.
concrete and steel. Displacing those has a positive footprint effect. If a forest is already second growth, it's already been transitioned from an old forest to a second growth forest. Actually, it has the most carbon positive benefit if you harvest it, make long-lived wood products out of those trees, and then plant another forest and keep that rotational forestry cycle going. So we're really proud that we have Big Coast, which is storing carbon, right? It's primarily old trees. So that carbon is locked up and doing the right things. We haven't converted it to second growth forest. And then we have these second and third growth forests that are contributing to carbon sequestration. They're, you know, sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere at a higher rate than an old tree, for example. Old trees are good at storing. Second growth trees are good at actively sequestering. And we just keep that cycle going and actually have a net positive effect, particularly in coastal forests, from a climate perspective. So, you know, the interior is having these big fires, and they are a net carbon emitter for wildfire reasons. We on the coast are a net carbon sequesterer, and that is, you know, in large part due to the fact that we keep planting these trees and we keep sequestering that carbon out of the air actively. So there is the adaptation pieces that we're talking about, seedlings, reducing our emissions, reducing our burning, all of those things that we're working hard on every year to try to drive those numbers down. And then there's the mitigation side where, growing trees, sequestering carbon is net positive from a carbon cycle perspective. So we have to do both. We have folks whose full-time job it is to think about those things. We have partnerships with UVic in UBC to get access to great science and modeling on all of those topics, and great partnerships with the province and other forest companies so that we can share those learnings. But we're all adapting, right? We don't have perfect solutions today, and we probably won't, but we need to stay on top of it and invest in finding some answers.
Sorry, just one more. So is the province, in total, our forests, are they, I heard that we were a net emitter. It changed from being a net sequesterer,
Yeah.
thank you, many years ago to a net emitter. Is that province-wide? Are we?
I think province-wide that might be true, and I think that's mostly because of the wildfire record we've had over the last 10 years has been particularly bad on top of the pine beetle areas. So we've had between the pine beetle epidemic and some very bad wildfire years, including this one. The interior forests have certainly been on an emissions trend. Coastal forests, because our fires are smaller in scale and you don't have those massive emissions from wildfire, are a net sequesterer.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Did you have something else, Councillor?
Yeah, I just had a question because I've always been curious about this, and since we've got the professionals in front of us, do you see any kind of law of diminishing productivity with each subsequent cycle of harvesting? Because it's not my imagination. It seems like the trees are getting smaller and smaller as you're harvesting them here into maybe the third growth and things like that. Has that come up at all, or do you see that? Or I know it's kind of hard because it's quite a long-term historical perspective, and obviously the first growth is much different than the cycles you're looking at. But can you speak to that at all, or?
Do you want me to try, or do you want to go?
I can share a bit of information with you on
I'm
that.
curious.
In different parts of the world where they're faster rotations and they're harvesting everything off those sites, there's certainly a level that happens with 40 or 50 rotations over a shorter period of time. The latest research over the last 20 or 30 years doesn't indicate that there's any change in site productivity. And often on the coast, we're not harvesting the entire tree to begin with. We're leaving tops and branches behind. Through the 90s, there was a lot of different types of silviculture systems and retention. So, that adds to the nutrient cycling. But in general, on the BC coast, rotations are a longer period of time. So there isn't a negative impact, if you will, like in other parts of the world. So that's what research tells us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation and for bringing the plan forward for this year, which looks like it may not happen anyway because of heat.
It's all weather dependent. So,
Yeah.
Colin, I don't know if you want to speak more to the contractor and all of that.
Yeah, it really depends on contractor availability and the weather. And,
Okay.
Last year, for example, we saw dry conditions into November. So that obviously changes the game considerably. So we'll wait and see how things develop over the summer and how markets change and contractor availability again. So.
Okay.
I will say we are, actually, we do think it might be positive for both the village's system and ours if we were able to do the road works before winter, because there's actually some beneficial upgrades of some old structures there that would benefit the water system. So, that if we could even get in and do the roads, that would probably be a win-win from our perspective. But again, it's completely dependent on the weather.
That was my second question, is whether or not you could do road work in these conditions.
Really depends, yeah.
Nobody wants to
I hate
start
that
the fire.
answer.
Sorry, I do have a question
Go ahead.
related to that directly. So, if you do defer logging due to, heat and weather conditions, does that get stacked onto next year so it has the appearance of a lot's happening all at once, or does it just push everything a year back?
I would have to say it really depends on what the season's looking like, whether it's, the start of August, late in September, but that tends to get pushed forward. It could get, if it was a weird weather in the fall, that could get pushed to spring 2024, but again,
spring,
it's really...
spring 2024's plans would go ahead as scheduled then, right? So you might get, instead of 1 block a year, let's just for simplicity's sake, you might get 2 blocks next year if it's favorable. I'm just thinking of the timing.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't really have there's other volume outside of the area plan, but we don't have, other than the map, what we've shown.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else planned there, so.
Okay. I was curious about the timing. Thanks.
Yep.
As you know, we would rather not have any logging in our watershed. That's our preference. And we understand that that's a lot of money. And so we're willing to work with you, and we very much appreciate what you guys are doing with the PWI. I think it's a really great model, and it gives us some, because I just see the blocks and I go, no, just stay right out of there. And so having access to that information, the LiDAR information and the data, and access for collecting data is really, really important to us. And so thank you so much for that. And I just wondered, I know that the Trent River flow has been decreasing for years, and so I'm just wondering what your relationship with Comox is. I know they're quite attached to that flow.
Sure, yeah, so we have, a relationship with the nation, which is really driven by their priorities. So we share things like, our work with PWI, and of course Comox is invited to join that group at any time, but really it's driven by the nation's priorities. So to date, we haven't talked a lot about the Trent, to my knowledge, but of course I'm not in every conversation. But in terms of Watershed, we hope that they'll have time to join us in the Perseverance Watershed conversation someday, but certainly subject to their own priorities.
Okay, great. The cut block, these cut blocks are quite close to Hamilton Lake, which of course is part of our system. So yeah, it is concerning to see a block of that size adjacent to our network, but and all the streams that are flowing to and from, and but yeah, I appreciate your dedication to working with us and with staff.
And just one point on the proximity, when we have a harvest area like we have in the past in this watershed nearby a reservoir, we will be employing an environmental monitor to do regular water testing and assessment of the local conditions there, just to be sure that we meet those requirements and have a good track record to show if there's ever any concerns about our activities of water quality.
That's great, thank you. And does that go for road building as well? I know the road goes right near there too. Okay, okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, so let's receive that delegation.
I'd like to make a motion to the council receive the delegation from MOSAIC Forest Management regarding updates on community and operational activities in the Cumberland region.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. And we're on to unfinished business, which is Cumberland Community Schools Society food share. And thank you so much for your donation to the food share as well.
Thank you. It's in the BC bike race, so make sure you watch.
Okay, we'll come cheer for you.
Good luck, Con.
Thanks. Okay. So there's do we need to have a conversation, or the recommendation is to bring back a report? So I think we gave some conversation to this in our last meeting, which I don't remember when that was. And we were looking at a 2-year agreement. So NCCSS has asked for a 5-year agreement. So looking for feedback on that if you have any, and anything else you'd like to share about this program, or what we're looking for from staff, I guess, in that report.
The other request was for
Space.
space, right? Yeah, so did we get feedback on that? And can we look at our new fire hall and that beautiful kitchen that they have in there as a possible space? They're not in there every day, is my understanding, right?
No, so the equipment and the food is stored there for periods of time. I don't know what the flow of traffic is like outside of pickup day, which would be every 2 weeks.
Yeah, basically there's some stuff a little bit left on the shelves. There's boxes, there's the materials. There's a bunch of fridges
Yeah.
that are on site the whole time. And then every 2 weeks on Friday, there's the
Pack up.
there's a whole bunch of stuff arrives and gets repackaged and then goes back out the door. So it's 1 day every 2 weeks. It's like super busy, and then it's pretty quiet most of the rest of the time. But there is shelving and fridges and stuff that are on site permanently.
Yeah. And the other option would be giving them a piece of land and they build something. CCSS builds something
Yeah, I don't.
versus us trying to find a building. So either of those options, I think, would be good. Yeah, and I'd like to see a 3-year. These programs are difficult to get up and sustainable immediately, and so we've given 3 years of funding. And so maybe we could look at doing 2 or 3 years and what the implications of that might be. She's asked for 5, so. And I know they're managing to bring their donations and stuff up in a good way, and the more people know about it, I think the more sustainable the program will be, but let's make sure they get there. Anything else?
I'm comfortable with 2 or 3.
Yeah, so are we getting a report back from staff on this?
That's the recommendation, yes. So if anyone would like to move that.
Oh, sorry, I was on another page here. You go.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'd like to move that council direct staff to prepare a report to provide, should I just say conditional bridge funding grant to the Cumberland Community School Society for the food share program.
Second.
Is that okay?
Just to
Do you want the
clarify,
2 or
like
3
the 2
years?
or you want it to come back with that bridge funding to be implications for 2 and
Yeah.
or 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Seconder?
Second?
Also, oh, okay.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Comox Valley Comox Valley Early Years Collaborative. So we got a request from the Early Years Collaborative. It's the Cumberland specific one, or is it the broader?
It's the broader one, I believe.
It's the broader one. Looking for representation from council on their collaborative. And Councillor Tyrion has graciously said he can fit that
You
in.
can breathe easy now.
Thank you. I was just looking at this. This is right during the rest of my work day.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a Monday every 2 or 3 months, so it's
Oh, no,
Yeah,
you haven't
with-
seen the full schedule there.
with Mondays off.
Do you have to be at every early years collaborative meeting, or does that include the steering committee meeting, the building connection steering committee meeting?
No, I believe it's the
one.
main
Just
one.
the one.
It's a lot
Yeah.
of steering.
I can
Let
be a
us do-
backup if you'd like for that.
Okay, awesome. So can I have the recommendation be that council appoint Councillor Tyrion and Councillor Barecki as alternate?
I'll make that motion.
I will
Thank
second
you.
that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay.
Sign me up.
Now Comox Valley Emergency Program Extended Service. Mike. Hello.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. So I hear you've already been briefed on this, but
We have.
it's basically a change of the bylaw for the way we pay for the service and the way we'll be able to contribute better to the service. We get a vote and things like this. So I think it's a good idea, a good thing to do, because we all work together anyways. And yeah, I think it's good. So you guys have been briefed on this? I don't
Yep.
know.
Yes,
Do you have
yes,
any
we have.
questions on it? I can maybe help you.
We just want to hear that it's going to work better for you.
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, we work well with those other groups, and I think it'll make the whole group way better, the whole
Yeah.
valley way better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll move that the Village of Cumberland consent to the adoption of the Comox Valley Regional District Bylaw number 766, being Comox Valley Emergency Program Extended Service Establishment Bylaw 1991, amendment number 4, under section 346 of the Local Government Act.
Second.
Second. And all in favor? Thank you.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Mike.
You too. Thanks for being here. 2022 Annual Report. Sorry, I'm looking for it because there's things I need to
Rachel.
ask to change. Rachel, do you want to speak to it at all or no?
I could just make a note that the annual report, it was published on the village website, and the notices went out in the newspaper, and we haven't received any questions or comments.
Okay, so there's just one small change. My appointments are still not quite right.
One question from one person. The mayor.
And it's me. So the BC Social Procurement Initiative Steering Committee is on there twice. So one of those can come off, and then it could be replaced with the Local Government Police Act Roundtable. And everything else is fantastic as far as I can tell. And that's it. So there's a recommendation to receive that report.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. All in favor? And notice, wow. Notice motion announcement. I'm like, wow, that was really
That
fast.
was it.
Homelessness. Okay, and we've added a vital piece of information here for the folks at home. Check cumberland.ca for updates, because sometimes meetings get canceled or moved at the last minute, and we wouldn't want you to come all the way down here and then there's not what you're looking for. Having said that, Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee is rescheduled to June 28th at 9 a.m. in council chambers. And questions?
There's no questions yet. We can wait a moment.
We haven't paid the arts community for the rights to any songs.
We haven't. I feel like if we started to sing at every time this time, that people would get us a
Get
song
more
pretty
songs
quick,
off, yeah.
right?
For throngs of thousands.
There you go.
Daniel.
He's asked if he could just have a little bit of village swag.
I have a pin
He
for
said,
it.
he said he would trade the song for a bit of village swag.
Not taking my flag. I like the flag. That's Sean's.
That's mine. I got my eye on it, don't worry.
No questions? And there's nobody here to ask any questions. All right, so a motion to move in camera, please.
I'll move the council close the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider bullets F, I, and L.
Second.